In order to be successful, do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. When everybody else is zigging, you need to zag. And on today's episode, we're going to tell you how you can differentiate yourself from your prospect. As you can see, we're going in this series here, highlighting and giving you some tips and some strategies for how you can differentiate yourself. We are crowded out there in the marketplace. We're going to show you what you should be doing and how you can do it to be the most effective in your role. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist podcast. I'm your host, Donald Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. And I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And on this episode, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with the one and only Tom Pollard. And Tom's going to break down literally, you're going to see on the screen. Well, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll get a chance to see this on the screen. But if you're not, you can go back to our website and watch it as well. But he's literally going to break down the messaging concepts and how we can create great message. What are some of the problems that we see right now with sellers when they try to pitch their product and service and sound exactly like their competitor? I mean, it's the only thing people can differentiate you on based on price at that point. And sometimes we think we're being different, but still yet we're confusing the buyer. We're going to break down literally what you should be doing and things you should throw out the window so you can start differentiating yourself and stand out from the pack. Oh man, I know a great book about that too. Sell It Like a Mango. Let's go ahead and dive into the episode. Now, with most messaging, when a sales rep is going to present or try to put themselves out there.
It's a great question with many moving parts. I mean, firstly, differentiation ultimately has to be embedded within the solution, at least to some extent. You need to do something better or different to your competition, but pretty much every company has that. I mean, some more, some less. Some solutions have breakthrough differentiation, others more at the margin. Then I think it really does come down to how you tell your story. If you look at, this is a deck from a large technology company, one of our clients, doesn't matter who it is, but you would kind of rather experience, dental work with no anesthesia than go through this. I think there are two fundamental problems here that are worth talking about. Firstly, the way we structure our messaging is typically characterized by three very toxic mistakes. The first, TMI, we just pack far too much into our messaging. I mean, it's bizarre. Some of these decks are 40, 50, 60, 70 slides with individual slides that have fonts that only dogs could read. So the customer is going to have switched off long before you actually get through the story. The second thing I think is interesting is that most sales messaging today is thoroughly confusing, or perhaps to be a little more gentle, just the value proposition is extremely unclear. I go through this and I kind of more or less understand most of the words, but I don't understand. Why should I move now? Why is this compelling? And that's often because, it's a features and functions focus. It's far too technical. There's always too much information. There's no logical narrative flow. All the things that the brain needs to comprehend and be moved by an argument tend to be absent in this kind of treatment. And then the third really toxic mistake is that almost all messaging is very sender-oriented. Donald, thanks for the time today. Let me tell you a little bit about who we are, how we got started, how cool our solution is, features, functions, feeds and speeds, and it's all about me. And the customer's sitting looking at this, and again, I could just take any one of these decks and say, every single slide here is about you and this solution, but why should I care? How does it relate to me? What this leads to is two fundamental problems. One is initial sales meetings are not sufficiently compelling. So a lot of times the conversation seems to go okay, but doesn't really go anywhere. That seems serious enough, but I'd actually argue there's a much more important and really more interesting problem, is that most messaging is failing what we call the retellability test. Now this is really interesting. Think about how sales works. I'm sure you all know this. At its simplest, this is you're having a one-on-one meeting with a customer. Is that meeting important? Yes, it is. Is that the most important meeting? No, absolutely not, because the decision never gets made there. Sometime later, there's another meeting. It's a meeting almost always that you don't get invited to, where this shadowy body called the decision-making group is going to make a decision about your solution versus a competitor, or your solution versus do nothing. And sales messaging hinges not only on the first meeting being compelling, but the ability of this guy, let's call this guy Donald, the ability of Donald to effectively retell the story in the second meeting. And the problem with most messaging is that you can roughly make it work in the first meeting, because sales guys navigate around this and they kind of avoid or explain away its weaknesses. You can more or less make the first meeting okay. But when you give them that deck and you ask Donald to represent or retell this, and it fails catastrophically. So we argue and we believe that the standard for sales messaging is not first meeting success, it is second meeting success. And nobody thinks about this. And what that means, I think, is really quite dramatic. Here's a great trick question for you, Donald. Is it the goal of a sales message to persuade? Yes, trick question. Is that its only goal? No. Sales messaging has an equally important goal of equipping. It isn't good enough for me, Donald, just to persuade you. I have to equip you to retell the story effectively. And this has profound implications on the structure of the message. For example, the message can't just speak to the interests of Donald. It has to speak to the interests of these other folks on the buying group. You do really, really interesting things in a sales message when you understand the flow of first and second meetings. I've actually made an argument that selling will be more profoundly affected than any other profession by the shift to virtual. Now, I can't get into all the great details here, but there are three fundamental ways that we now have to adapt to a completely different social dynamics. One is distraction. Customers are very highly distracted, so if you have too much information and it's confusing, they have no chance of comprehending it, even less than when it was live. The second challenge is very interesting. We call this limited mental bandwidth. We have less mental capacity in a virtual world. That's called Zoom fatigue. So tactically, always arrange your sales calls in the morning, because you don't want to get on the wrong end of the Zoom fatigue curve. But what this really means, again, is you've got to think a lot about the clarity and simplicity of the message, because you're trying to get the arrow through a narrower window. And then finally, this is beyond fascinating, the other big impact of the virtual world is such a big issue for sales, is the loss of feedback or social cues. Great salespeople have very high social IQ. They read a room, they understand how it's responding, and they navigate even towards objections. Like, Donald, you look a little skeptical. What's going on there? What have I said? And I draw out that objection and I deal with it. But in a lot of virtual settings, especially if you use PowerPoint, which you should never do, if you've got slides up on screen and you lose that face-to-face connection.
Tim, if there's one major piece of advice you want folks to walk away with, what's that one major advice? Last words.
Yeah, that's a wonderfully interesting question. Here it is. It's very umbrella. A lot of people look at their messaging and they see these 50 or 60 horrible slides and they think, you know what, let me just try and get that down to 20 or 30 slides. I'm like, no. It's like saying, I got to solve the problem of kicking my dog by just kicking my dog less. No, you have to fundamentally rethink the way you tackle messaging. Almost everything that's been taught about messaging and communication is wrong. PowerPoint has driven unbelievably bad and ineffective habits. It's not PowerPoint's fault. In fact, the original designer of PowerPoint hates the way it ended up being used. We've defaulted to a failed model. So if you look at your deck and you're saying, oh, it's not very good, I could pull a few slides out. Like, no, you've got to kind of go back to bare metal, rethink the model, create brain-aligned messaging based really on the principles that we've begun to talk about today, and then you can be incredibly effective.
Listen, that was Tim Pollard. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead and connect with Tim. Let him know that you found him on the Sales Evangelist podcast, and also check out some of the cool things that they're offering, some of his books, and as well as some of the content that they're sharing on their website. They know what they're talking about, and he proved that and he showed it. And if you're not using a whiteboard or things of that nature in your presentation, I highly recommend you take advantage of trying that strategy. It's a great one, and it really can help you to be able to show your expertise, differentiate you from your competitors, and make money for your organization. Speaking about making money too, if you haven't started using our friends, our sponsors, I mean, they're giving away some amazing tools. They're giving you some great opportunities. If you're not taking advantage of those offers that we share on our show, I encourage you just to stop, Go try it, test it out, and see how you can and see the results. And when you can see those results, then obviously you can go and make the investment. But I'm just telling you, they're giving you some great deals. Take advantage of them. Highly recommend that. As always, I share this stuff because I want to help you. I've been in your shoe, and I know what you can accomplish, and I know what we can do as sellers. I want you to be able to find more of those ideal customers. I want you to be able to know what to say when you reach out to them. I want you to be able to close more deals. I want you to tell some of your friends and your family who don't know about this podcast how they could take advantage of it as well and find success. But most importantly, I want you to raise your level of thinking and go out each and every single day and do big things. Thanks so much. I appreciate you. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video today. If you enjoyed the content, I ask you to go ahead and hit that like button, that thumbs up at the bottom right-hand corner. Also, to make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. This way, we'll keep you up to date with all the latest sales strategies, latest tools, and things that are going to help you to not only find more prospects, but to close more deals. Thanks so much.